Alright, so I'm going to show you how to use the macro tracking sheet, which I've just uploaded. First thing you need to do is you need to pop in a link, which you'll find in this email or wherever you've come across this link. That will take you to the calculator, which is hosted on Google Sheets. Now, on Google Sheets, it is not a document that you can edit. As you can see here, hit the buttons and nothing's going in. But what you can do is you can download it as a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. So we'll do that. And then we'll open up the calculator, we can get started. So this is the calculator that I'll use with clients when they've just completed the tracking challenge, if they've found an energy balance. So basically their weight is not moving. If the weight's moving, particularly if it's dropping after they've done the tracking challenge and they've recorded their training nutrition, then there's no need to do this. Basically what we'll do is we'll just stick with what they are currently doing, because that's getting the result that we're kind of looking for. So this is the calculator here, and I'll run through the different components using myself as an example for my next kind of 8 weeks that I've just mentioned. So first things first, you're going to enter the background information. So we're going to start with the starting weight, which for me is 96 kilos right now. And then you've got the goal weight, and I'm looking to get down to 90 kilos or below, but we'll use 90 for this example. And then the time frame, which we're going to enter in weeks, which is 8. Now, the next thing is the average daily food intake. So this is the food intake that you have recorded during the tracking challenge, or essentially whatever the food intake is when you've found that energy balance. So for me, from the tracking I've done, that's coming at 3,000 calories, well, not 30,000, 3,000 calories per day. Now, with these 4 metrics here, the starting weight, goal weight, time frame, and the average, I think it's just said time frame, and the average food intake, we can basically work out what is going to be required as an energy deficit and what that's going to look like. So the required energy deficit is going to be 750 calories per day. Now this is going to be a negative number because obviously that's energy that's going to be coming out of the body and being burnt. So it's a negative number. Doesn't make too much of a difference for now. What's interesting is that we can also look at what proportion of what the deficit is as a proportion of your overall energy intake, or the average daily energy intake. So for me, it's going to be 25%. This is towards the upper end, but it's not super high. Let's not mess with that. This is what happens when you don't know Excel very well and the spreadsheets very well. What you will notice though is if, let's say, my energy intake was 2,000 calories, then this is going to be switched to being 37.5%. So it's quite a high intake. Usually we're looking for somewhere in between 10 to 25. You can push up to 30 depending on the amount of physical activity that you're going to be doing and the amount that you're prepared to restrict from your food. So we'll bring this back to 3,000. Now, the deficit from food, this is another number that you need to enter. So this is something that I'll run through with clients when we're looking at restricting a diet, is how much energy we can pull out. Usually we're looking at 300-400 calories. In my situation, I'm happy to pull out 500 calories of food. So 67%, or 2/3 of the deficit, of the 750 calorie deficit, is going to come from food, which means there's an extra 250 calories that I need to bring in from exercise every single day. Now, when you're using the tracking challenge, like we are in this situation, basically what we're assuming here is that everything that you're doing that got you to that energy balance, you're going to keep doing. So these are all changes that need to be made on top of what you're currently doing. So we're not necessarily working out your basal metabolic rate and then multiplying that by physical activity level, which is the kind of standard way for working out energy intake and requirements. What we're using is that number factored into what you've tracked here. So basically the data we pull from your tracking is a little bit more personalized to you, as opposed to using equations to kind of come up with those numbers. So there's an extra 250 calories that needs to be burnt. So for me, I'm going to increase just some cardio kind of training, swimming essentially, and that's how I'm going to burn that extra 250 calories on average per day. It doesn't have to be 250 every single day. You can do 500 one day, nothing the next. But over the course of the week, that deficit multiplied by 7 will be the number you need. Now, what we can do here is we can use the body weight to work out your protein intake, and that's the first macronutrient that you're going to set. So overall energy intake and protein intake are the two most important factors of the diet. So what we do here is you come across to this table, and once you've entered your starting weight here, it will multiply your body weight by the factor of whatever protein intake you're looking for. So 1 gram per kilogram body weight, right up to 2.2. Now, 1 is at the lower end, 2.2 obviously at the higher end. But what you can do is you can look at the table, you can kind of pick out which protein intake might be most suited to you. Generally speaking, we want to find something in the middle. I do well on a moderately high protein intake, not super high. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 182 as my number here. So I'm going to enter that. And then what you'll see here, when you come down to the macronutrient split here, the protein intake is going to be 182, whether it's a low carb, high carb, or balanced diet, because the protein intake is going to be fixed, and it's the carbs and fats that are going to be varying. Now, the fat intake will never go below 0.5 grams per kilogram body weight. So even on the high carb, low fat diet, you'll see that never goes below 48, which is 0.5 per grams per kilogram. And the carb intake will never go below 50. Personally, I've got very few diets where people are eating less than 100 grams of carbohydrate, but if they did want to go to an extreme kind of level, say they're on a super low carb diet for some particular reason, maybe it worked really well for them and they were looking to transition out of that, this would be where you could kind of start. Generally speaking, we're going to be somewhere in between, usually balanced, or most people like a balanced to higher carb kind of diet. So what you can see here is that with the protein intake fixed, the fat either high or low, the carbohydrate intake will change accordingly, but the total energy intake is exactly the same. So across all of these three diets, because the protein intake and the total energy intake is exactly the same, the body composition changes should be very similar across all, or they should be technically exactly the same. But what you've got is you've got three different systems that people might adhere to differently. So someone who needs more carbohydrates in their diet might do really well on high carb. Someone, like I mentioned before, who's coming from that low carb background might do better starting at this kind of level here. What you can do is you can vary those diets up over the course of a nutrition program or something like that and actually test what people adhere to best. But this is a really good starting point. So essentially what we've done, we've used the starting weight, the end weight to work out how much weight needs to be lost, how much fat essentially needs to be lost. We're using the time frame to work out how quickly that needs to happen, and then using the energy balance or the average daily food intake as the start point here. So this is all the information that you can only get from tracking, in particular with the food intake. If you want to use different equations to start you off, you can do that, but the drawback is that information is not actually personalized. So it might come out saying your food recommendation or guideline might be at 2,800 calories, but if we're looking at tracking that's saying you're actually eating 2,000 calories, well, that's 3,000 calories, that's an extra 200 calories that we're pulling out of the diet for no particular reason. So this is basically what I use to kind of get people started. It does not factor in the overall energy expenditure or physical activity level specifically, but that's because that's factored into the average daily intake. So if you found balance, and that's already been factored in there. So this is more looking at what we need to change. So guys, give it a crack. Try some different intakes, try some different protein intakes and see what you can kind of do. I won't run through any other examples for now, but if you do have any issues with it, do let me know and I might be able to help you out.